Hi, I'm Dr. Althea Need Kaminske, and in this office hours video, I want to talk about the relationship between attention and learning and what that means for setting up yourself for success in learning and sort of like setting the stage for effective studying, effective learning. So when we talk about attention and memory and cognitive processes, we tend to talk about them as if they exist in sort of separate spaces, right? And in diagrams, when we draw out what these processes are and how they interact, we'll literally draw them in separate boxes, right? Like here's a box for attention, here's a box for memory, and maybe there's an arrow that goes between them, so like we know they're interrelated, but they're always represented as these distinct things. And while that's true to a certain extent, right? There are attentional processes that go on in memory processes. The reality is that when we are experiencing these things, when we are thinking with our whole brain, right? We are thinking in real time, right? We're experiencing all of these processes kind of laid on top of one another. And the actual experience of it is not as these separate, distinct things, but really as these really interconnected bits of our reality. So one really obvious place in which attention and memory interact is in our working memory. So in working memory, that's your ability to use and manipulate information over the short term, about 2 minutes-ish. So your ability to kind of know what's going on, what is the relevant information, what do you need to be doing to stay on task, what are you trying to remember, to think about, and also, what are you ignoring? What are you not doing, right? Your ability to stay on task, to focus, and to complete sort of complicated things is your working memory kind of in action. A good example of this might be in solving little games or puzzles. So I do the daily Wordle, which is this word game where you have to guess a word and you only have so many tries. I think it's 6 tries. And every time you guess the word, it will give you feedback about the letters you've chosen. So if it's the correct letter in the correct place, you get a green box. If it's the correct letter but in a wrong spot, you get a yellow box. So as you're going through and guessing, you get some feedback about, okay, here's where the different letters are. It's surprisingly challenging because we don't usually think of letters in words in this way. And so as you're going through, you're trying to think of what words do I know that maybe start with P as the second letter, and I've also already maybe got feedback that L is the last letter. And you're going through and maybe you get so focused on the P as the second letter, oh gosh, you didn't pay attention and you forgot that you need to have L as the last letter, right? And so there are all these sort of different things that are going on as you're working through, trying out different things in your head, trying to think about where they go, right? All of that's using your working memory, right? You're trying to remember the words you know, how they're spelled, what are the different sound combinations and the different possible spellings in English to put those things together, and what is permissible in terms of this game in the context of what's going on right now. Right, so this is this really careful orchestration between your attention and your memory working together. But your experience of that is not, oh, I have my attention, okay, check, and now I move over to my memory, right? Your experience of that is all together. And you know that when you get distracted, or we know that when you get distracted in these things, you're going to make mistakes, it's going to take longer, right? So maybe you're trying to play this game while someone in your family is talking to you, right? And you're going to go, oh, darn it, I forgot that L had to be the last letter, and I made a guess that was only somewhat useful, but I kind of wasted one of my opportunities because I wasn't paying attention to this thing, right? So your attention and your working memory, right, all play together to help keep you on task and to help you perform the best way you can perform. What this means for studying and for learning is that while yes, you should be using effective strategies and trying your best to use all of the things that we talk about the learning scientists, so space practice, retrieval practice, interleaving, dual coding, elaboration, right? All of those things are really important. But if you're in an environment where you're getting disrupted and your attention is getting disrupted all the time, it's not really going to do that much good, right? Because you're going to make those mistakes that we talked about. And in most ways of attention and working memory shows us that when we switch tasks, right, when we try to multitask like that, we make mistakes. We don't realize we make mistakes. We don't remember as much of the relevant information that we're trying to learn. And we'll make mistakes in the way of putting in irrelevant information, right? We get mixed up, we get confused because we're always kind of switching back and forth. So anything that you can do to limit those distractions, to reduce that, will kind of set you up for success, right? So this is why earlier I called this, I think I tried to call this, setting the stage, right? You're just sort of prepping the environment to help you learn. So some examples or some ways in which you can do that. One, again, I talked about limiting distractions. So that can mean a lot of different things. That can mean a really sort of basic, easy way to do this or to interpret this is sitting in a quiet place with a clean work environment. Fortunately, you can't see my desk below me, so just know that after this, I will clean up my desk to help me focus on things. Limiting distractions. So I came in to record this into my office instead of at my home office because the home office is distracting. I have a dog, a cat, a toddler, a husband, right? All of these different things in my home environment that are going to make it a little bit more difficult for me to stay on task because I'm always slightly distracted, wondering what's going on in some other part of the house. So that's something to know, right? Try to the best of your ability to find a quiet, clean, distraction-free place to study. I also want to note, and this is really important for educators, that obviously there are going to be big differences here about people's ability to do this. People have different home environments. They have different things going on. You may not always be able to make a clean, distraction-free environment. And so that's really important when we think about what are some of the barriers to success that people are facing in terms of effective studying and learning. Sometimes it might be environmental. It might just be like, I don't live in a place where I can always sit someplace quiet, right? Maybe it's a big family, maybe you've got noisy neighbors, maybe there's construction going on next door, right? There are all these environmental things that can affect your learning and memory as well. So that's sort of tip one. To the best of your ability, create a distraction-free environment, quiet, clean, without other people around. Another way in which you can, so step two, another way in which you can limit distractions is to think about your electronic distractions, right? So your phone, right? What notifications are popping up on your phone, email, I think you may have heard my email ding when I was talking earlier. So the best of your ability, try to limit those things. And one thing that I talk to my students about is making sure that they are controlling the technology and the technology is not controlling them. Because I think it's unrealistic to think that we are not going to check our phones or our devices. There are many ways in which it's a really good thing that we can do this. It's kind of amazing, right? That we can call over long distances, we can text, we can email. I live in the part of the country where I am about 8 hours from my closest relative, right? So if I didn't have the ability to call and text my sisters, my relatives, right, it would be really bad for me. I would feel really, really isolated. So it's really good that we have these social connections that we want to maintain, that we have friendships, right? Those are really important. But it's important to know how they are distracting you and for you to be in control of when you access those things instead of the other way around, right? Social messaging apps, different types of things on our phones and devices, these are all built by companies who need you to look at them in order to get paid, right? They make a lot of money out of our engagement, which is, sort of neither here nor there, but it's just to understand that their motives are not necessarily to give you a distraction-free environment. Their motives are to make money. So it can be very tempting and very easy to get distracted. So to the extent that you can, limit those. Maybe put your phone on airplane mode, put it on silent, turn off your email notifications, and do your best to minimize those during the time that you have set aside to focus, right, and to have attention on the task at hand. Another thing to note, another kind of barrier to what I'm proposing, right, solid blocks of uninterrupted study and learning time. Now, there's, I think, two different flavors of this other barrier. One is that, again, to reemphasize, not everyone has that ability, right? Like, life happens. Real life happens outside of your control a lot of the time. And we live in sometimes very stressful environments. So that may not always be possible. Another reason why that may not always be possible is just sort of some limits on your current ability to focus and pay attention. again, we're kind of trained at this point to pay attention to our devices, right? We interact with social media and things that have a vested interest in us paying attention to them. And this may be kind of shocking the first time you sit down to try to get work done and realize, like, I can't stop thinking about stuff, right? I go to work on my homework, and the first thing I think is like, oh, I wonder what my sister's doing. Maybe I should give her a call, right? Or text her or message her, right? It can be really tempting because we're so used to kind of thinking about those things that trying to not think about them, somewhat paradoxically, makes us think about them more. So one thing to know is that this is normal, that this happens to everybody, and that it's challenging, and that that's okay, and that you can slowly build up your kind of tolerance for sitting down and focusing. And that's going to look different for everybody, but you can slowly work on it. And maybe first you sit down and study, and you can only do 10 minutes at a time to really kind of effectively study, because otherwise you're just kind of going crazy thinking about all these other things that have to get done. And so setting up regular breaks for yourself so that you know, hey, I can kind of trust myself to sit down and focus here, because I know in 10 minutes I'm going to go do that other stuff, and then I'm going to come back, right? And then it's maybe not as disruptive for you to sit down and focus because you know you've got that break coming up. Another very real limit on this is just like physically. We are not designed to sit at computers all day long, which for many of us is what studying and learning looks like. So there are some actual like physical limits on your ability to sit and focus for long periods of time. So I recommend building in these breaks, not just to kind of have that sort of mental relief of, okay, now I can check my phone and now I can look at these things, but also a physical one, right? That you can get up, walk around, go to the bathroom, get a drink of water, stretch, move your back, right? There are very real physical consequences to sitting at a desk all day. A few years ago, maybe last summer, the summer before, ended up having to go to physical therapy because I sit at a computer all day, right? And my back pain turned into hip pain, turned into leg pain. I talked with physical therapists, and they told me that, yeah, they've been seeing a rise of these types of cases, especially over COVID, when more students were having to be at their computer all day. And so they're seeing a rise in these cases, not just in, adults like me, but also in younger populations that were before coming in for sports types injuries. And now they're seeing this type of injury that has to do with just sitting, right? And we're not using our bodies in the full range of motion in which they're designed to do. So again, being mindful of that as a very real barrier and limitation on your ability to get things done. The way to address that then is just like I talked about before, setting timers and breaks for yourself. So that way you can get up and move around to sort of help rejuvenate yourself physically, but also kind of mentally and emotionally if you need to check on stuff, if it is a little stressful to focus on one thing. And here again is where your devices and technology might be able to help you, where you may be able to use them instead of them using you. There are lots of apps and programs designed around this, what I'm describing, this like studying or focusing on a task for little blocks of time that kind of add up. It makes it measurable so that way you have a marker of success. It can be really frustrating doing things like studying and learning, and a lot of my work is writing papers and emails, things that don't really have a kind of tangible endpoint or check marks, right, or benchmarks. You're just kind of doing this thing for hours and hours on end, and yes, you know it helps, yes, you know it works, but you don't really have anything to show for it. So it can be really nice to have a system. It doesn't have to be an app. Maybe it's just check marks you're making on a piece of paper every time you've studied for 20 minutes without interruption, right? But having some sort of achievable goal and some sort of external reminder of that goal and marker of progress can be really helpful and really motivating for how to sit down for longer stretches of time, accomplish longer blocks of work, because you're making something that's otherwise somewhat invisible much more tangible, right? Something that you can see, you can mark your progress, you know how well you're doing. And that can be really motivating to help people sit down and focus for long blocks of time. Again, hopefully, instead of one long block of time, you're doing shorter blocks and breaking it up, moving around, right? Doing that type of stuff. But again, having that kind of physical checklist or having an app that keeps track of it, all those things can be really useful. So those were some of the ways in which you can set yourself up for success. Before you even start to do retrieval practice or you're worried about spacing out your learning, you kind of need to know how to manipulate your environment, how to set things up externally so that internally you can think through things and really give them the focus and attention that they deserve. So I hope that was a helpful office hours video for anyone who's thinking through how to have conversations about effective study habits and what are maybe some small things that you can do to set yourself up for success in terms of attention, learning, and memory.